Welcome back to the Deep Dig of Sports Pod. I'm your host, Drew. My other host right over there.
What's up? It's D. Good to see you again. Be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to drop some comments below and make sure you subscribe because we are coming down the home stretch here with college football. The weeks are just ticking by.
I wanted to start with BYU losing to Kansas in an upset. I know they could still get in with the conference championship game, but this is a huge blow for BYU in a game that really was decided by a quarterback punting the ball and hitting the ball off a helmet of a BYU receiver. BYU still getting in the playoff, or you think Colorado sneaks in now?
I had been thinking that Colorado was going to sneak in, but I was kind of doing a doomsday scenario where in my mind it was like BYU ran the table and then they lost in the championship game. And you have to put two Big 12 teams. Now, this loss with BYU really does mitigate that. And it's only going to be a one bid league moving forward. And it is kind of up for grabs. I do think Colorado has a path. And I think Colorado, I mean, we'll talk about their game a little bit later because that's something I want to dig into. I think they're looking pretty good. I'm going to be completely honest. I think they could beat this BYU team that's been flirting with disaster for a couple of times throughout this season, and it finally came back to bite him in the butt.
Yeah, this BYU team is really good, don't get me wrong, but they have been playing with fire in these games, really winning close games throughout, and things just been breaking their way. And in this one, it just felt like there was not necessarily that it didn't feel like they were going to lose, but it felt like dagger after dagger, things were going wrong that weren't leading to a good conclusion for them. And Colorado is rolling right now. Like, I really don't know what's going to happen in that matchup because I like Retzlaff. I like their running game. I like their what their defense could do at times, but Prime just has Colorado balling right now.
Yeah, and again, we'll talk about Colorado like right after this, but to stick to BYU, you're right. It just seemed like all these like mistakes, little things here and there snowballed for BYU. And you see that, like, as you mentioned, the quarterback punt that ends up going off of a helmet and it just seemed like football karma was in the air. And those last second wins that BYU pulled out earlier in the season came back to it was just the ghost of football past. You know what I mean? And it was just something that this was the karma that they had coming to them. And people had this slated like, okay, BYU is going to lose here. BYU is going to lose here. And it finally just hit to where, I mean, this is a Kansas team that's like arguably like one of the best losing records coming into this game. I mean, they were red hot. They beat a Iowa State team and just crushed their soul. They go out and they beat this BYU team. And I mean, looking at the schedule, they actually play Colorado the last game of the season. They just want to play spoiler. And I think that they have a really strong team to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't take anything away from Kansas where they played a great game. They, got innovative with that play call. Jalen Daniels is a pretty solid quarterback they have there. And I felt like they just wanted more. I didn't think that there was a lot of urgency from BYU at the end of this game that felt like, oh shit, we could lose this game. It felt like they were in a situation where like, well, we'll just go down and score. When it got down to the final 2 minutes, when BYU is rolling, they're throwing the ball great, but they want the game to end with them getting a touchdown with as little time on the clock as possible. But I feel like it took away so much momentum from that offense to say, okay, well, let's run the ball 3 times. Let's make Kansas use those timeouts just in case they come back later. But I felt like BYU should have just thrown it, punch in the touchdown, and play defense. And they got a little too cute with it. They got a little in their head on trying to play the analytic of it when you needed a score to win. You needed a touchdown to win, and you should have had that first in your mind rather than let's run the clock out so that Kansas doesn't get another shot after we score, and you didn't score.
Yeah, and I know everyone talks like realistically it is a big pivotal moment was that punt and then the mismanagement of the clock in the fourth quarter, but realistically one of the bigger things that was more telling was Retzloff just being sloppy and throwing a pick in the end zone at the second end of the second or the end of the first half. That really kind of showed me what kind of game BYU was playing. And it's like, okay, it doesn't matter. We're going to score anyways. And it's so nonchalant to just throw it up there. It was just a duck on a cloud. It was pretty it was pretty telling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it felt kind of like how Miami's been this year, where oh yeah, probably should have lost a couple of these games, but we're winning, so we're gonna feel comfortable in these situations in the fourth quarter, and then you lose, and it just takes away all what you built on the season. And yeah, both those teams can still win their conference, but they're definitely flawed teams, and they're definitely not worth, I think, a top 10 ranking.
Well, and the thing I do worry about, or I'm like, okay, I'm very interested to see. Cam Ward said it after Miami lost. He was like, okay, we needed that. We needed the kick in the pants to really put it on. And my thing was like, okay, well, Cam, you didn't need 5 kicks in the pants. Like this is a loss coming off of you not looking good or the team not looking good and being in these firefights for weeks. For BYU, it's kind of the same thing. They've been dabbling in this, like, okay, we're kind of playing on the edge here. Does this turn into an Iowa State thing where, okay, we got the loss and then we go out the next week and just lose again just because we're demoralized? Or do they rally back and look better and try to close out this season because there's more on the line right now? Like, what do you think is going to happen with BYU moving forward?
I'm not sure, because I think what we were talking about, Colorado is so hot, and BYU, like, they're better. Their roster is better than 13 points against Kansas. Like, they really felt like they were kind of coasting energy wise in this game. And you're right, they should have had more urgency from the start of this one. Like, let's get out there, let's get a 2-score lead, let's kind of then we'll coast. And it just felt like they never really got to put it all together, and they didn't feel like they were going to lose until the very end.
Yeah, 100%. And I think so. Let's go ahead and, well, I mean, we've been bringing up Colorado this whole situation. Colorado goes out there and gets a win over Utah. And I mean, let's say what you want about Utah, but Utah, despite having a very disappointing season, putting all of their eggs into the Cam Rising basket, they still have a very viable defense. I mean, I believe going into this week, they were the number one ranked defense in the Big 12. So this isn't no joke. And Colorado just showed that they just have better athletes. I mean, Shador, despite having a few missteps, which is the first throw when it got picked, they had a snap that got bobbled and it was a fumble. But other than that, they kind of boat raced them, and it even then it didn't really feel like their A game, to be completely honest.
Yeah, no, and looking at the stats right now, like, I think what, 4 receivers had better days. The 3 receivers had better days than Travis Hunter, who is your best receiver on your roster. And so looking at that, and then 340 for Shador, like, this offense can light up the box score. They can light up the scoreboard. The main issue with them coming in was offensive line, defensive line. And it seems like they've figured out the offensive line, but when they get to, let's say, if they got into the playoffs, how well will this offensive line seriously hold up against an SEC school or a Big Ten? I really don't know. But from what we're seeing right now, they're putting it all together. They put it on a Utah team that, isn't a pushover. They had 3 picks against Isaac Wilson, and the defense is playing just as good as the offense.
I was actually kind of surprised they went back to Isaac Wilson because Rose did look good in the Holy War last week. I thought they should have just kept with the hot hand there. But I mean, he had a really good touchdown right over Travis Hunter. And I mean, that just happens. It just comes with the territory when you're a DB. Sometimes you're going to get beat. Sometimes it's a great defense, better offense. It just happens. And so Travis Hunter just kind of sealed the deal. I'm pretty sure he's a heavy favorite for the Heisman moving forward, and it's going to be his to lose. He had the pick, he had a rushing touchdown, and then he had an amazing 4th and 8 conversion that was highly, it was double covered. He had to jump up and he came down super hard. I think that was the highlight of the day for me, but he solidified himself as the Heisman favorite moving forward. Do you think that anyone else has a chance, or is this going to be Heisman Hunter?
I mean, I think I'm in the camp right now where I think it's kind of ridiculous that Ashton Genty isn't the number 1 pick right now for the Heisman. I get it. Travis Hunter's doing something we haven't seen really in doing both offense and defense. He's making plays on both sides of the ball, but he's not the best receiver in the country. He's not one of the best corners in the country, like stats wise. So I mean, I think Ashton Genty is doing something we haven't seen in decades. Like he's having a great season, an amazing season, and I think he's getting just a little discredited for being in Boise.
Yeah, I think 100% he is, but also he wouldn't be having the season that he would be having if he was in the SEC or if he was in the Big Ten. You know what I mean? I think even now, if you were to plug this Colorado team and put them in the Mountain West, I think they have similar, like, they blow out competition as well. So I don't know that it's completely unfair, but it's there. That's the narrative.
I think just his stats are there. Like the numbers for Genty are there in my eyes more so than Travis Hunter. And I mean, maybe some people could throw some numbers at me in the comments and say that I'm completely wrong. But I think as a running back, he's having a Heisman worthy season more so than Travis Hunter is having at receiver and or cornerback.
I just think that when you do both, you're doing both. You're doing something that people haven't seen ever. You deserve the credit for it. It's best all-around football player, and it's obviously Travis Hunter.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about these games. Georgia beats Tennessee, and that one was close kind of till the end there, and then Georgia started to pull away. And you see Georgia's coach talking a little shit at the end, saying, "Oh well, you guys try to come out here and play a SEC schedule and go on the road in the SEC." Got a little bit of people talking on the Twitter.
He's 100% right, though. I mean, he is. He's 100% right. Georgia has had a tough schedule compared to, I mean, realistically, I was even telling you this when we were watching games. It's like the SEC is carrying every single week. The SEC is carrying matchups. They have very interesting matchups. And you look at like the Big 10, the Big 12 is interesting, but it's like, okay, none of these teams are actual like contenders. You want the Big 10 to have big matchups, and just none of the good teams are playing each other. It's just cupcake after cupcake after cupcake on everybody's schedule. And I think, he has a valid point that they have a very tough schedule in the SEC.
And I seen someone trying to make the argument, but like, "Oh well, didn't you see Penn State go on the road against Auburn?" I'm like, Auburn, like one of the worst teams in the conference. That's your argument that Penn State goes on the road and beats Auburn? And
I mean,
then
they tried. They tried. These are all scheduled well in advance as well. So I understand the thought process in that. Like, hey, we tried to schedule this. We tried to schedule an SEC opponent.
And then I agree with what you're saying with the Big Ten is the primetime matchups for the Big Ten have not been there on the schedule in comparison at all to the SEC or even the Big 12. The Big 12, I feel like every week in the evening, I'm watching an amazing Big 12 matchup, and the Big 10 is just not. I mean, even this week, Oregon takes on Wisconsin, and that was a nail biter, and it's just a slog of a game. It's 16-13 Oregon.
Yeah, and I think something needs to be done about these conferences moving forward. I just think they're getting too big to the point where none of the good teams are going to face each other at all. And it's going to be like, okay, who do you have on your schedule and how can we compare it to like what we're going? Because how are you going to compare, let's say, Penn State to Indiana when they both lose to Ohio State? It's like, okay, well, I don't know. They both look good against random teams, but they both lost to Ohio State. Who do you pick? Who would be the higher seed in that one? Like, I have no idea how you judge it.
Yeah, and then I know we were talking about this earlier off camera, but you have Notre Dame over here without a conference getting moved way up the list. And I mean, is it time where we just got to say Notre Dame, pick a fucking conference and go get in there and play a legit schedule?
I don't even like. I don't want to be a Notre Dame hater, but I'm becoming a Notre Dame hater just because of their fans. Get into a schedule. Stop playing like, oh, well, we can go out there and beat any team that you say. And the SEC, they play nothing. Look at Bama playing Mercer. Okay, but Bama also had really tough games on their schedule. Notre Dame hasn't had anything. Their first win, which was the biggest win, is going to be an SEC team. So if you want to sit here and like compare notes and do one for one, we're not going to. And I know that the rankings already came out as of right now, and they're sitting there at number 6. They are not the number 6 team in the nation. This is bullshit. I don't want to sit here and act like they're a good team when they lost to a MAC school. Like, get out of here with that. Get into a conference so that way when you get into the playoffs, it's because you did something. It's because either you won the conference or you looked good against good opponents. Don't sit here and tell me that you're a good team just because you beat up on a bunch of nobodies. And I really hope, like, now I'm hoping they get in and just get dog walked. Like, that's my wish. I hope that, but I know that they have this matchup coming up with Army. I hope Army. God bless the troops.
Yeah, this is gonna be their toughest matchup in a while with Army, and I'm pulling for Army here, but I would just want to wrap up here talking about the ACC because SMU wins a tough one against Boston College. Clemson wins a last-second one against Pittsburgh with Klubnik running a crazy touchdown in. I really I could not say who is gonna go into the playoff from the ACC right now. It is a toss-up for me.
It's pretty crazy. I don't know what the tiebreakers are between Clemson and Miami because they both have one loss in the ACC, I believe, and SMU is actually undefeated in conference. So I don't know going down the stretch if everything stays the same, who ends up getting into that championship game if SMU continues to take care of business and remain undefeated in the conference. And if not, and we have 3 one-loss teams, how do you decide who gets in? It's going to be a shit show.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about this when we talk about the playoff brackets later in the week, but do you think with 12 teams going into playoff that we are going to be satisfied being like, "You know what? Enough of these teams got in," or are we still going to be like, why did these 3 or 4 teams not make it?"
I think people are always going to feel like that. They're always going to be like, "Oh, my team was just there. Like, why couldn't we're going to leave off probably 1, 2 loss SEC team." You know what I mean? And that team's going to feel slighted, but at the end of the day, you have to reward conferences. You have to make these things matter for the regular season to matter. And so I understand the thought process there. I don't think that it should be a first round bye. I think it should just be an automatic bid, just like how the NCAA tournament for basketball is, where you get a bid, but you don't get any special treatment or anything like that. I know there's going to be teams that are going to be left off just because of the sheer amount of chaos that we still have and teams that are still available for playoff contention.
Yeah, well, and even now you have people saying, "Well, South Carolina can actually get in," and that's like way down the list. So
That's a 3 loss. Yeah, no, there's no way. There's
there's
no
a
way.
lot of SEC schools that are gonna feel like they should have been in and are left out. Or is there gonna be like so many SEC schools getting in just on their name and on their conference and leave out some of these other guys who maybe deserve it a little bit more, or maybe they just didn't have a strength schedule as much as the SEC?
We'll see next week. Like, if Army does go undefeated and they beat Notre Dame, but Notre Dame only drops like 3 spots in the committee's rankings, like that takes away another spot, and you have to put Army into the playoffs, right? But does it knock Notre Dame all the way out to where they're
It
not in the
should.
playoff
It
anymore?
should. I've been
I
saying
mean,
this
but
for a
we
few
see that they
weeks.
overvalue Notre Dame for just because they wear gold helmets.
But yeah, what I've been saying for a few weeks now is they're undervaluing losing to unranked teams, like or lesser ranked teams. Like if you lose, Tennessee lose to Georgia, yeah, knock them down a little bit. But come on, it's Georgia and they're ranked right behind them. But losing to an unranked team should knock you like more than 10 spots down off on the list, in my eyes.
Okay, but how do we value then you getting a win, but it not looking great? Like Oregon is ranked number 1. They eke one out against Wisconsin. And yeah, Wisconsin has looked good, up till this point, or it looked more improved up until this point, but it's still a lower unranked team. Do you take that into account, or do you like, hey, every team gets one of them? Let's go ahead, because even Texas struggled for a good portion of that game against Arkansas. Yeah, they pull it out and they get a 10-point win, but you've seen weaknesses with Texas, and they haven't really played anybody. So, how do you feel about that? Like,
I just think,
if we're
yeah,
gonna
like
knock unranked losses, like, are we gonna, if you struggle against them, we're gonna knock you too?
it's still a win. Win's a win in the win column. Like that's all that matters to me. But in Oregon's case, like who else would you move up? Like Ohio State, who was at home this week, like Texas, who also struggled against Arkansas. Like no one else really went to claim that spot. So I mean, they got the win. They secured their spot. In my eyes, if you win the game, you should not drop anywhere. Like you should be where you're at. You at least, if you're not going to move up, you shouldn't drop down. That's kind of how I feel.
I don't think all wins are created equal. If we're going to be honest, like, it's not a 3-point win against Wisconsin should not count more than, Ohio State blowing out Northwestern. And yeah, it's Northwestern, it's a lower opponent, but that's what you're supposed to do.
Here's gonna be, you're gonna hate this take because
Okay.
I know how you feel about like Indiana and everything. To me, if you go undefeated in a
Stupid.
full Division I college football season, you should be in the playoff, regardless of your schedule, regardless of how you looked in those games. If you go undefeated, you run the table, and there's no other teams that are undefeated. I think you should get in. I think you should have a spot.
Okay, so let's go back to last year, how they had Florida State. You want Florida State in the 14 playoff, or
In a
even how
12
they
in a
expand it
12 team
in
playoff,
12
yeah.
team?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a 12
Then
team
they
playoff.
get boat raced, and everyone's like, okay, well, that was a waste of a fucking playoff spot.
Why are we doing this where you're doing the argument, fucking Kirk Street over here? Oh, why are we gonna put this team in? We know they'll lose. Oh, we know. Oh yeah, because we knew Arkansas was gonna beat Tennessee. Oh, we knew this team can't. Kentucky was gonna be who they beat, Georgia or whatever. Like we don't know that teams are just gonna straight up win in the playoff. So if you earned your spot to be there, you should be in there, and you earned your spot to get boat raced. Like
Okay, well
if you're
then,
gonna get
okay,
boat
by the
raced,
same token, then Liberty, who went undefeated last year, I believe, should have been in the playoff.
in the 12 team playoff, yes.
That's fucking stupid. No. Not all
Yes.
conferences are created equal. Not all schedules are created equal. Just because you won every game on a cupcake schedule, give that schedule to someone else on the team or on the playoff ranking, and they're going undefeated as well. Like, that's
You
kind of
can
stupid.
you can go to the Mountain West too. You don't got to go collect your check in the SEC. You go to the Big 12. Get the fuck out of the SEC then. You don't want to you want to collect an SEC check? Get out of the SEC. There's a million teams in the SEC.
I think the conferences are getting overbloated as well, but that's dumb. That is so dumb.
I don't know.
Is there any other games that you want to talk about?
No, we got off the rails here, but I think we're good.
Actually, I kind of want to talk about that Boise game because it was close for a second there. They did end up pulling it out. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it started bad because there was 14-0. They threw a pick or fumble or something. San Jose State was at the goal line about to go up 21-0. They went forward on fourth and goal, didn't get it, and from there Boise just came back.
Yeah, and people were predicting that this was going to be an upset spot for Boise State just because San Jose State does have a pretty good passing attack, and they kind of were exploiting them for a good portion of the game. But Boise State shows resilience. They do what good teams do. You get wins, you blow them out. And it's not just Ashton Genty doing it by himself. They have a legit passing attack. They are going to get steamrolled as far as defensively, but if they can kind of compete on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, we see that they do have some pieces there to make a good push.
Yeah, they're not just Genty. Like Madsen makes plays. I really like the combination of Camper and Caples in the receiving core. Like they can win in other ways than just Genty pounding the ball. And their defense showed resilience coming back from the deficit. They honestly, I feel like they needed this game to kind of wake them up too. Where San Jose State, great program that they're putting together. They have, I guess, the best receiver in the country stats wise, and they came out and punched him in the mouth. But Boise, I think for sure has solidified. Like they're winning this Mountain West. They are legit in that conference, and they can do it from behind. Pause. They can be front runners and they can run the ball with Genty. But if they get down, they can throw the ball and get back into these games.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention them really quick. I want to do 2 more games and then we'll call it a day because we did watch these games and I want to talk about them, discuss a little bit. LSU, Florida.
Why do we have to talk about this fucking game? Why do we have to talk about Brian Kelly still? Why is Brian Kelly still have a job with LSU? Okay, talk about it.
I don't understand how you go out there and lay that egg if you're LSU. This is a team that looked dead in the water last week. Billy Napier's been fighting for his job. The fucking AD has to make a statement about Billy Napier's job every 3 days. Like, for you to go out there and lay this egg, and it just looked like you had no idea what you were doing as far as your own game plan. And on the other side of the ball, defensively, you let DJ Lagway just kind of, like pick and choose, like pick you apart and do whatever you needed to do and just not look like a tough defense at all. And so I will sit here and eat my crow and I will say LSU was just like, they were a good-looking girl at the bar, and then you took her home, and then you woke up in the morning, and you're like, ugh, what the fuck is this? That's LSU. And yeah.
LSU in this game was out-coached, out-schemed, out-managed. They out-effort. Like, the quarterback play for LSU was atrocious. The getting to the line and just getting the play off was atrocious. Every snap they're getting 1 second to 1 second left in the play clock because they're confused. They're not getting the play call out and they're not getting the protections out. They look so lost in such a late part of the season and then Brian Kelly's on the sideline like confused at every fucking call from the refs and from the game going on. They could have came back and won this game or at least tied it up. In the end, they got the ball, I think, with 4 minutes left, and
it was like 4.5 minutes left.
Yeah, they're like 2 minutes to get 2 or 3 plays off. They're just burning clock. It was getting ridiculous, like the mismanagement of the clock with a guy who should be ahead of it. He should know what's going on. I don't know how he still has a job here at LSU.
Yeah, and they managed both halves. The end of both halves, the first half and the second. And the first half was a little bit more egregious. I'm like, what are we doing here? I turn to you and I go, hey, they're burning so much fucking clock and they just ended up getting nothing out of it. Like the first and the second half, they was completely mismanaged. And then I don't know what the game plan was. We were like, dang, it seems like when they're getting the ball out quick, they're being very effective. Why don't they do that more? Instead, they were doing needless runs. Nussmeier was doing dumb shit the whole time, just running around the pocket, running into pressure rather than away from pressure, running into pressure, creating sacks for himself. Like he got sacked a bunch, but half of those sacks do not go on the offensive line. They go on Nussmeier himself, and he played himself out. If you were even thinking about anything with the draft, I think he's played himself out. I know people were talking like, oh, he might be the 4th ranked quarterback. Cross him off your board. NFL, like anyone in NFL organizations, go ahead and cross him off your board.
He just couldn't get the ball even just out. And at the end of the game, I was like, I would even take you just throwing a pick here. Like, just get the ball out of your hand. He's holding on the ball forever. And then LSU, why can't you just roll with Durham the whole game? The guy pops off the screen. He's explosive, but then you have Josh Williams in there dropping passes left and right. Like, just make Durham the guy. Commit to him. Like, he has 90 yards. So, and then you have LSU receivers dropping passes. Nussmeier can't hit an out route to save his life. He's holding the ball forever. He's running into sacks. And all of that coming together with Brian Kelly just terribly managing this game. It was such an ugly performance for LSU in a game that they could have been in. And I think Lagway looks great. Like, Lagway is going to be a great quarterback next year.
Yeah, I mean, sad as I mean, this saved Billy Napier's job. I know they had already come out and made statements. Hey, we are going to roll with this guy. They go out last week and then get boat raced after that. They're like, hey, we're still going to roll with him. And then you get a win against LSU. And I think that's going to save his job. And I don't think that it should. I think that he should also be fired. Florida is settling for a guy just because, hey, DJ Lagway likes him. I think that DJ Lagway is going to be a fine quarterback, but that is kind of stupid just to do it, just to keep the status quo. But I know Florida has other shit going on as far as their basketball coach, and it's just a kind of disarray. So it is what it is.
I would say this was more a LSU lost this game more so than Florida won it.
I don't think that's that fair. Florida did go out and kick their ass. Florida put it on them. Florida went out and got a bunch of sacks. They ended up doing stuff offensively, and LSU just didn't. They weren't in this game at all. So yeah, Florida, you got to give them their credit where credit is due. They did beat them. But also LSU shot them. It was like, yeah, they shot themselves in the foot, and Florida was there to just beat their ass right after.
Yeah. All right. What was the last game you want to talk about today?
Give South Carolina their flowers. They go out there and do the Lord's work in beating this Missouri team that was trying to garner buzz about their college football playoff standings. And thank God that they just kind of wiped the floor with them. And they're like, hey, that's done. Kudos. And realistically, I know that they're not going to get into this playoff, but you've built something that you can build off of next season. And I think that takes a lot of pride. And I think that they're going to be a force to reckon with next season.
Yeah, I mean, we said it last week that this South Carolina team, if they got into the playoff, had potential to make some noise. And Sellers is showing you why we kind of had that take. 5 touchdowns, 21 for 30. Like, he looked great. They have receivers, they have running backs, they have D linemen. Like, they have every piece you would want in a championship team. And I think this team is going to be dangerous next year. Like, if they can retain a lot of this talent and Sellers just keeps on progressing, like, the ceiling is the roof for this team. The sky's the limit.
Yep, definitely. And I'm just so glad we don't have to deal with a Missouri conversation about them making the playoffs. Like, I don't think that team should have been ranked this year. I don't think that they should have had any buzz to them about, oh, maybe Missouri. No. Let's go ahead and just take that out, and I'm good with that.
All right. Well, that's all we got for today. Thanks, guys, for watching. We will do our AB Top 25 video and our playoff bracket video later in the week. So look out for that. Make sure you subscribe, comment, like, all that good stuff.
All right. Later.